Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be going through our Week 6 waiver wire ads.
Hike!
All right, Joe, per usual, we're going to go through our top 5 waiver wire ads. Let's start off with the first one. This goes back to Thursday night, Joe, where Kirk Cousins threw for over 500 passing yards. The Atlanta Falcons offense seems to be waking up. We were wondering where it was. It finally has gone out of its slumber. So, Joe, how much FAAB are you spending to get Kirk Cousins? Do you see him as a starter? You see him as a streamer? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I do. I would kind of label him as like a streamer play, but I'd still probably be willing to go, 5-10%. With that in mind, he's got some really good matchups coming up. He's going to be facing the Panthers this upcoming week here, week 7 at home against the Seahawks. Then week 8, he's on the road against the same Tampa Bay Buccaneers that he just, went absolutely nuclear on Thursday night against. And then week 9, he's even got the Cowboys, which, I think you're able to pass on them as well. So with those upcoming matchups, I think 5 to 10% is probably fair on Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, depending on where you're at with your quarterback situation, I think 10% seems okay to me. I mean, at the end of the day, like you just mentioned, those next 4 games, man, you can't get much better than that. So if that offense is truly waking up like we think it is, the NFL, any team can show up on any given week. And that's why, it's random at times. You would think that, the outcome is going to be exactly the way you think it's going to be, and it never turns out that way. But
yeah,
on paper, these next 4 matchups look really good, and it seems like that offense is finally waking up.
Yeah, I mean, we knew things were going to take time for Atlanta. Obviously Kirk Cousins coming back from the injury, but then even new offensive coordinator there was Zach Robinson coming over from the Rams. So just different mindsets and different things to learn. But definitely, I know the Bucs secondary without Antoine Winfield Jr. kind of suspect, but nice to see that he was able to take advantage. And 500 yards, that's impressive.
Well, and the piece of it that's kind of strange is the lack of involvement from Bijan Robinson. Most people probably, I know you've always been kind of suspect on the guy. He's always been, Mr. Hype. But hey, you drafted probably an early first-round pick for this guy. I think he could do a lot. He's, sharing with Tyler Algier at times, not really getting the volume we thought he would.
Yeah, and everyone just thought, Arthur Smith going away was going to be, allow, Robinson to be kind of unlocked and utilized in different ways. Instead, Algier's still getting his, and, it's just interesting.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So going to our next player, we're going to be talking about running back Tank Bigsby. Joey had quite a big game against the Indianapolis Colts. We know that this was a juicy matchup for the Jaguars in general, but we thought it might be Etienne, not Bigsby. Ended up having 13 carries for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns, only rostered in 31% of leagues. Now, the big thing is after the game, the media was asking Doug Peterson, hey, is Etienne not the guy anymore? Is it going to be Bigsby? And he came out and said, no, Etienne's our guy. Is that coach speak, Joe? Should people be running to their FAAB to get Tank Bigsby? There's been rumors that Etienne is on the block, that he's a trade candidate at this point. As the deadline is not really approaching, but about a month away. So what are your thoughts on Bigsby here?
Yeah, as far as Doug Peterson's comments go, it's hard to believe them just when we've seen this before in other games where Etienne's just kind of on the sideline, and it's like they ride the hot hand. And Tank Bigsby's looked pretty good this season. Just crazy what a difference a year makes. Last year he didn't look very good as a rookie. Fumbled earlier, was kind of in Doug Peterson's doghouse there, and it was the Etienne show. This year it's a lot different. I think it's tough for me to put a bunch of FAAB down on him, though. He did take advantage of a really good matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. I know he also had 90 yards rushing against the Texans, but that was only on 7 opportunities as well. So, I do think he's probably worth an ad just in case, he does end up taking over this backfield, and who knows if ETN possibly does, come on the move in the later weeks here. So I think around the, somewhere between the 5% mark is probably, I do think he's worth, adding for that.
Well, the big thing is ETN Bigsby is not really involved in the receiving game, right? He only
Right.
had one target for one catch for over 20 yards. Whereas ETN is still that factor in the receiving game, but they were even rotating Dearness Johnson. So it was kind of a strange,
Yeah.
rotation going on there when ETN was the guy. It's just so interesting because, like you said, last year, I know for me personally, and I was wrong about this, but I faded ETN because they drafted Bigsby decently high. I want to say it was a 3rd round pick. And I was like, oh boy, ETN's in trouble. And then ETN had a career year. Then I was like, this year, I was like, well, okay, well, ETN's going to still hold that backfield. And what do you know? Tank Bigsby's on the scene. So I don't know. I think I almost would put 15%. The big thing, though, is ETN going to leave the team? I just don't see ETN being demoted, which, so if you are going to spend a high amount of FAAB, in my view, either you've got the spot for one, or you're thinking that ETN will A, get injured, or B, more than likely be not on the team. I don't see him getting demoted. It doesn't seem to make sense. They picked his 5th-year option up. That's expensive. It's a fully guaranteed amount. So I don't see that happening. It's just a question of, will he no longer be on the team? And more than likely, I don't see that happening unless things get really rocky in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I agree. And partially why I just think he's potentially an interesting ad, why I wouldn't go crazy for him is, this upcoming week he is facing the Chicago Bears, which is a lot different than facing the Indianapolis Colts. So it could be some tough sledding, this upcoming week in week 6 here.
Yeah, I think the non-emotional reaction is about 5%. The more emotional, if you think, and not to say that it's bad for you to put 15%. I'm just saying if you do, I understand the path. If you do, it's just the path is you've got to hope ETN is no longer going to be on the roster here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and then is Bigsby going to get a couple touchdowns every game? I mean, that's where it really took him over the, over the 20-point mark and really made it a great week for him.
So next player we're going to be talking about here, running back Tyrone Tracy, the rookie out of Purdue. Joe, he was able to take over as a starter with Devin Singletary being out for the game. Did decently well, had 18 carries, 129 rushing yards, no touchdowns, 2 targets, 1 catch, 1 yard. So he did look pretty explosive against that Seattle defense, although Seattle has been able to be exposed recently. I know you're not too excited about this one. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, the main reason I wasn't too excited is just the fact that we don't really know how long Singletary is going to be out for. If he's back next week, I just don't know, how fantasy relevant Tyrone Tracy is. This was a big game for him because he had the opportunities, and I, give him credit. He went out and took the opportunity, ran with it, had a really good game. And I know someone in our league, had him and played him, and kudos to them for actually doing that. I don't know if I would have had the courage to do that, but had a good game. I mean, this upcoming week, if Singletary is out, I mean, he's got a decent matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, who've kind of been susceptible to the run game this year. So especially if you're the Singletary owner, I do think he's definitely worth adding. Just not sure I would go crazy. I probably would stick to about 3 to 5%, maybe, just not going crazy, but I do think he's worth a speculative ad.
That sounds about right. My only thing is I felt like Tracy looked more explosive than Singletary. So part of me feels like, right. So as a result, though, is it just because, sometimes, as you know, you only need to crack open the door a little bit when an injury happens, and all of a sudden you don't look back. I mean, look at Justin Fields, right? The calf injury, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was a starter. He was in pole position. Now, all of a sudden, Russell Wilson's the emergency quarterback. So, I mean, we're not talking about Fields and Russell Wilson. I'm just using that as a point to say, could this be a point where Tyrone Tracy now, could he pass Motor Singletary behind?
Yeah, I'm just not sure he will. I think he's a good change of pace with Singletary. I think when Singletary comes back, the job is his. I mean, look, the Giants front office was really happy to get Devin Singletary, in the offseason. They added him. They specifically sought out after him, knowing that they weren't going to bring back Barkley. Brought him in here, and Singletary, when he's played, he's looked pretty good as well. So I just don't see them just, leaving him by the wayside because of injury.
Yeah, I think 5% sounds about right. If you want to be aggressive, go up 10, 15%. I wouldn't blame you because I see the path of him taking over. But, it depends on how aggressive you want to be.
Yeah, to me, that's a sign of desperation.
Well, depending on your running back situation, you might have to make that move. Let's talk about the next player here. Wide receiver Jordan Whittington of the LA Rams, rookie out of Texas, has been more and more involved in the Rams game plan. I think he's getting more comfortable in the offense, to be honest. He had his career best showing. 10 targets, 7 catches, 89 yards. He's yet to have a touchdown. But Joe, he's kind of becoming a reliable guy for Stafford. Although we do hear he is going into a bye week, so it could be hard for people to want to pick him up. And then they're saying in week 7, more than likely, Cooper Kupp is coming back. So what are your thoughts on Jordan Whittington?
Yeah, I do like Whittington, and obviously the Rams have liked him a lot. Once they brought him in, you heard buzz about him in training camp, but it is tough, right? You mentioned Cooper Kupp coming back, and essentially, I always thought Kupp was Whittington was more so taking over that Kupp role in this Rams offense. So if Kupp's going to be back week 7, could be tough, but I do think Whittington could still be worth an add, and if you're not looking to where you need like a spot start and add somebody and you can kind of hold somebody on your bench. I mean, there's no guarantee like Kupp coming back and he remains healthy over the long haul, or we don't even really have an update in when Puka Nacua is going to come back. It's not like Demarcus Robinson's been running away with a job. Tutu Atwell has been surprising in that offense, but I still think even with Kupp, there is possibly a path and opportunities for Whittington still to come.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I probably would not. I had him at one point expecting him to become this type of player. But I don't think he's been dominant enough to think that you need to go get him. And with Kupp coming back and Puka, I probably would pass on him entirely. If you want to put $1 or $2, I don't see any harm. If you want to roster him, he is going on into a bye week though, so might be difficult to be able to create that bench spot for him.
Yeah, I mean, if you're able to stash him for $1 or $2, I do think it's potentially worth the stash if you have the spot.
Now, a guy I'm more interested in and I would go after is wide receiver Jalen Tolbert of the Dallas Cowboys. Just watched him here on Sunday night. Had 10 targets, 7 catches, 87 yards in that game-winning touchdown. Joe, we know that Brandon Cooks is now on the IR because of that infection that he's dealing with, so he's going to be out for at least 4 games. And honestly, the Cowboys don't have a lot of receiving options to begin with outside of CeeDee Lamb. So he's basically taken over the Brandon Cooks role, and he looked quite good. So what are your thoughts on Jalen Tolbert?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, he had a role even with Cooks out there.
I know he did. I'm just saying it's an expanded role with Cooks out.
Definitely expanded. I just look, you look to when he's getting his targets too. A lot of times it's these third down plays or have to have it. Even the, he caught the game winner, but the play before that on the third down, like Dak skipped it to him. They had an opportunity on third down to get the touchdown to Tolbert. Then fourth down, they drop a play, get him open and get him the touchdown. I do think you're not wrong. He's probably one of my, potentially one of the favorite targets, especially if you need a spot start, maybe got bye weeks or injuries. But the Detroit Lions is this next matchup. So it should be a back and forth shootout battle. Maybe it's something reminiscent to that Seahawks and Lions game. And this was a game last year between the Cowboys and the Lions where, both offenses excelled and it was a big point game. You're going to want pieces in this. So I think you could be aggressive with Tolbert and go 5-10% here.
Yeah, I think around 5 to 7 or 8. I guess the big question is CeeDee Lamb has not been CeeDee Lamb. You even saw them kind of arguing on the sideline. They, for whatever, they're in the heat of the moment, right? They're trying to win a game, whether it's Dak's fault or CeeDee's fault or what have you.
I don't know what happened on that touchdown, man. That was just absolutely weird. I don't know whose fault that was, but the fact that it looked like Dak stared him down and then just threw it right to Dante Jackson, I'm baffled.
Yeah, it was definitely a strange play, but I think overall, I just don't know, because even when Tolbert wasn't really used even last year, the outside CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson, there really wasn't any, and from what I remember, any fantasy relevant, receiving players last year. So the question is, will Tolbert rise up? He could. So if you want to, I see the path. I think 5 to 7% sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think he could. I mean, week 2, he had 9 targets. He had 10 targets, against the Steelers here. So, I mean, he's had a decent amount of volume. I know it's kind of been up and down, but you hear time and time again, every time I'm watching these Cowboys game, keep mentioning how Dak and Jalen Tolbert spent a ton of time together when CeeDee Lamb was holding out and wasn't there, and they kind of developed the chemistry. And we're starting to see that continuing to come here during these games.
Well, he definitely has flex appeal, and for the amount of time that Brandon Cooks is out, which there's no guarantee he comes back right after 4 games, depending on how that infection, is handling in his body. It could be a big deal. So, to me, I mean, I like what you said. You've got bye weeks this week. Go ahead and go get a guy like Tolbert as just a streamer for this week going up against the Lions, which is a juicy matchup. And then from there, see from there. You don't have to keep him the entire year, but why wouldn't you want to get this guy?
Yeah. I like you said, week 6 spot start alone. He's my favorite outside of Cousins, favorite non-quarterback here that we've mentioned.
Yeah, I think you're right there. So that does it for this episode. We went through some week 6 waiver wire ads. We'll be doing them throughout the season. If you haven't had a chance, go ahead and check our previous ones. You can see our track record, whether we said it was good or bad, or hey, maybe those players are still out there, and maybe it's your time to go get them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.